this is worse than the frigid outskirts. Like, who the hell came up with this nightmare? This person had some serious issues in his life. He probably broke up with his wife recently or something. And he's just like, dude, I hate everybody. I want everybody to suffer. And then he designed this level. Yeah, I'm dead. Oh my God, no! Shields up, Ironbreakers. Rurikhan here, coming at you with another edition of the Cons Cast. And in today's episode, we're going to be talking about Dragon Marked for Death for the Nintendo Switch. This title was sent to me by Inti Creates so that I could give it a look and tell you guys my opinions on it. Now, you might remember that I talked about this game in the past before it was released because it just completely came out of nowhere for me. I was so surprised that I was unaware of this game's existence because it seemed like it was going to be right up my alley. And I got to tell you, now that I finally got my hands on it, it is right up my alley, but at the same time, I'm not sure that this game is going to be for everyone. I think that this game has a niche audience of people that are really going to enjoy it, but the people that are not going to be into it are really going to hate it. So you guys got to pay special close attention to everything that I'm going to be talking about to ensure that either this one is for you or it is not for you, okay? So this is a 2D platformer action RPG hybrid, and this is being developed by one of the teams that has worked on a lot of Mega Man games. Now, even though Mega Man is a franchise owned by Capcom, Inti Creates have done a lot of work in those titles. So some of the stuff that you will see in the gameplay might seem somewhat familiar, but it does have RPG elements added on top, such as different classes, such as a gear system, as well as a bunch of other stuff that we'll talk about. So I think that the first thing that I would like to address is the visuals, as I tend to do for most of my videos of this format. And I gotta tell you guys, I really like the art of this game. Now, this is very much a pixel art game, and apparently from my Wargroove video, I became aware that actually there's quite a few people that are not in the pixel art. And I think that has to do with how long you've been gaming for, because maybe if someone got into gaming after the HD era of hyper-realistic graphics and 3D visuals and all this stuff, maybe they don't understand the appeal of old school pixel art, but with better animations that they couldn't really do at the time, and more modern gameplay mechanics implemented in together with those visuals. Maybe they don't see the appeal in that, but personally, I find that really cool, which is why I really, really like the art direction that this game has. I like the character designs. I like the animations. It's just the art of this game really, really gets me. And I understand that that's not going to be for everyone. And as a matter of fact, I've kind of extended myself a little bit more on that topic. But I just wanted to make sure that people understand where I'm coming from when I say that I really enjoy the visuals on this game. Just like I said, I really enjoy the visuals on Wargroove, is because they have a very specific appeal to maybe people like me who've been gaming for a long time. So anyways, basically what that means is I love the art of Dragon Marked for Death. I think it's friggin' fantastic. Now, in terms of sounds and soundtrack, it didn't really stood out to me like as amazing or anything, but they're pretty good overall. I like the soundtrack, I like the sound, so it's cool. Now, when it comes to the actual gameplay, let me just give you a heads up warning. If you're going to play alone, this game is hard. You know, like, there are certain games that are all telling, oh yeah, sure, this game is challenging, whatever. No, this game is hard because this game will punish you hard. This game will challenge you, particularly at the start when you're still kind of learning the ins and outs of the game. Like, look, Dragon Marked for Death has no problem with killing you. And as a matter of fact, it has no problem with killing you repeatedly and making you fail the mission. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, mind you. I'm just saying that that is going to be something that a lot of people are not going to be equipped to deal with nowadays, because we're used to a much bigger degree of hand-holding. And I got to tell you, I was really surprised when I was coming out of the very first mission of the game. You could almost call it the tutorial mission. And wait, was the tutorial mission or was the mission afterwards? Might have been the mission afterwards. But basically I was like, okay, so I'm getting my feet wet in the game and I'm getting started. I'm doing the first mission. And boom, I died at the boss fight. And I was like, whoa, what what the hell, dude? Like, he killed me once. I was able to basically bash his head in after that, but that first boss killed me once. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, I did not see that coming at all. And like myself, I've heard reports from other people that they also thought, Jesus, that was a little bit surprising how you start playing the game and it feels one way and the gameplay footage that you're watching might actually look easier. Because I remember that I was watching the gameplay from the developers playing the game and it seemed a lot more easier and accessible than the final thing ended up feeling when I initially began playing it. So what I'm saying is, when you get started playing this game, it is going to feel hard. It is hard, in my opinion. But the more you play it, the more you begin understanding the different mechanics and the flow of combat, because it has a very distinct flow of combat, and that flow of combat is going to be incredibly different between the four different classes that are available to you, which means that the version of the game that you choose to buy is going to very much impact your gameplay decision, because the different versions of the game have different characters available to them. More on that later. But basically, I just want to prepare you guys for that start. It might feel a little bit rough. But the thing is, with that sense of challenge and difficulty, as always, you will also get an incredible sense of achievement when you do begin to understand the different systems of the game and you begin to tackle these missions and you begin to play your characters better and better. It is going to feel incredibly satisfying when you particularly figure out a specific boss, and you're going to get the sense of achievement that comes with that, which is something that not every game is able to do properly. You know, a lot of times, like, certain games might be easier and you get to the game and it's easy and you're just like, oh, okay, it's fine, I had fun, all these other things. But not a lot of games can get the sense of achievement right. And I got to tell you that particularly clicked with me on a very specific boss. I was actually live streaming this on Twitch. And as I was live streaming this boss, I remember that I first got into the boss and I was just like completely overwhelmed with all of the mechanics that they were throwing at me. So this boss consisted of like 4 tentacles, and 2 of the tentacles would shoot this acid ball that when it hit your character, like, it would confuse your controls, so it will reverse your left and right controls for your character. And then the other 2 tentacles would do this beam attack that would basically take like a third of my character's health. And you're talking about the character that is the tankiest character in the game. So I was like completely overwhelmed. I tried that boss, I think, like 4 times when I first got there. And I remember after the 4th attempt, I was like, this is completely impossible. There's no way I can do this. This is bullshit. Like, this was literally the way that I felt about it, right? Like, my immediate gut reaction to it. But you guys know me. I'm an iron breaker. You know what I do. I smash my face against it until I figure it out. So a couple of attempts later, I ended up understanding, okay, so there's these different platforms that you can get to as you are playing during this boss fight. So if you come to this specific platform, it's going to make it easier to deal with these 2 tentacles, and then you can... So basically, I started dividing and conquering and figuring out the specific strategy that I had to do in order to beat that boss. And once I understood the very basic mechanics of it, and I mean, I say basic, it's still pretty overwhelming depending on the character that you're playing, because that's a whole other thing. Like, with my character, it was one tactic that I used. I don't think that the tactic that I use would work for other characters. You would have to use something a little bit different, a variation of it. But basically what I'm getting at is that once I figured out how it was done, it was really cool. Now, unfortunately, when I kill him for the first time, I realized, wait a minute, after the boss, there's like a whole level afterwards that I had to go through. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this level is insane. And I ended up dying, and I had to go back and fight the boss again. And it was crazy. But at the same time, when I understood the mechanics of it and all of that stuff, it became very, very satisfying to just apply those mechanics and do the thing. Not to mention that that particular boss fight also felt a lot harder than it needed to for me, because I was a little bit under-geared. The weapon that I had available to me, I was a little bit unlucky with the drops that I gotten, because the drops that you get throughout the game, they are random. And so I didn't get a good weapon, and my character, by its nature of being like the tankiest character in the game, also, you know, he's got potential to deal massive amounts of damage, but in order for you to deal massive amounts of damage with the warrior, you also have to put yourself at great risk. So there's a risk reward there. And because of my lack of mastery on that particular fight, every time I put myself at risk, dead. So, but yeah, that was like the turning point for me when I went through that boss, which is why I'm going through it with such excruciating detail, because I think everyone's going to have that moment at some point if you end up picking this game up. And until you get there, it's going to feel like this unsurmountable thing. But once that thing clicks for you, you're going to get it. And once you get it, I think you're really, really going to enjoy it. If you enjoy this kind of challenging gameplay, if that is up your alley, if you're looking at the gameplay that you see in this video and you think, no, I think I'd enjoy that, then you might like it. So here's how it works. This that I've been talking about is all single player. It feels incredibly hard, all that stuff, when you are playing by yourself. Now, the thing is, if you happen to be playing in multiplayer, the game feels a lot easier, a lot more accessible. There's more rooms for you to make mistakes. And overall, it does feel more fun, but at the same time, it also feels a lot easier. So I don't know if maybe it was just because I was struggling so much with the single player aspect of it that when I played with one friend of mine, everything just became a lot easier. Or if that's just the way that they plan on playing the game. But if you go to the website, they actually say it's the multiplayer action RPG. So it's like they make sure to specify that bit. So I think that this is a game that you will want to play with friends a lot of the time, especially once you start getting in the later levels, when you start going after specific loot and stuff. But at the same time, I also feel that there is something there for single player. And maybe I'm being a little bit confusing, but that's kind of how I feel about it. But either way, moving onwards, if there is a sense of achievement when you do overcome all of those things, when you are struggling at it by yourself or whatever, I also have to say, when you do fail, if you fail a mission, it does feel extremely punishing. Now, there are two things that will allow you to fail a mission, you know, with the variance of certain quests, because like in certain quests, they might be escort quests, or one of the quests that I had at the very start, it said, hey, you got to protect the sails on this ship, and there were goblins coming down and trying to burn the sails. And if you fail to keep the sails alive, essentially you fail the mission right there. But you know, the mission failure things that kind of go from mission to mission, those are usually, you can die, I think it's either 3 or 4 times. I think it's 4 times. That 4 times you fail, and if you run out of time, you fail. And this is important because some missions, when you are playing by yourself, are really tight when it comes to time. You will have to run through the map most of the time. When I was still learning the game, there were even maps where I just decided to skip enemies because I felt the time pressure so much. But do remember that I had an underpowered weapon. That was a big reason why. But I felt the time pressure so much that I would just skip through enemies and I would just try to get through the map as fast as possible. I feel like when you are playing by yourself, one of their intentions is that you might want to play the same mission more than once. Like the first time is for you to get a feel for it, and then the second time is when you're actually trying to do it, at least at the start. But I also found it interesting that with their level design, they're not shy about making certain things be very, like the fail conditions of quests, they don't mind you failing. Which is, again, it's very surprising. Like one of the maps in particular, I even saw a video because I've been doing more research about this to see what other people kind of feel like about the game. And I saw a video of someone saying specifically, this mission is impossible because I've done this thing and I could not complete this mission. And this person specifically said, this mission's not possible to do. Now, I'm not hating on them because I understand where they're coming from, because the first time I went through that mission, I was just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I'm lost. I have no idea. But the second time that I went there, I found a secret passage. So there's an actual secret passage in one of the missions, and if you don't find that secret passage, you cannot complete the mission. And it is never mentioned to you that there is a secret passage. They just say, hey, I want you to go do this thing, kill these 2 dragons. And you're like, okay. And you go through the whole level, and you don't figure out a way to access the second dragon. And you're just like, I don't know what to do. But there's a secret passage that takes you to a secret area. And that's where the second dragon is. I feel like I'm describing the game at such excruciating detail in some of these missions, but most of this stuff is the very early missions. I would say the first, I don't know, 5 hours of gameplay that you'll experience, so I don't consider this to be that big of a spoiler. But either way, if you do end up failing, one of the things that is going to happen is you're not going to get any loot. So as you are going through these levels, you're going to be finding chests. Some of these chests will be in areas that will be locked and can only be accessed by certain characters. So, for instance, the Empress has this whip that allows her to whip herself up into certain areas of the map. The Shinobi is able to glide as well as climb up walls, and the Witch has like a levitation thing, and then there's more abilities. The Warrior is able to push big rocks out of the way or certain other obstacles, and certain chests will be hidden behind some of these areas. But either way, as you go through the level and you find these chests, that is where you get your loot. It doesn't tell you what loot you got. It gives you like an unidentified item, and then when you finish the run, when you finish the mission, you get to identify those items and you get to add them to your collection. And like I said, if you fail, basically, even if you've picked up a bunch of loot along the way, if you fail, you get nothing. You get nothing. So it is extremely punishing when you do fail in those missions. Another thing is having multiplayer will also give you access to additional loot because, like I said, some of the areas are only able to be accessed by certain classes. So if there's like a big rock blocking a chest, only the Warrior can push that big rock away. If there is something that's like on a really high up point, most likely only the Shinobi will be able to get there because the Shinobi has mobility that allows them to climb up walls. So actually playing with your friends will also reward you with more loot and most likely faster run times through the levels because someone can go do an objective to the right of the level while somebody else goes to do an objective at the left of the level. And, having that kind of coordination with your friends might make things go smoother, which is why this game in particular, I really like it for the local co-op. And when I say local, I don't mean couch. I mean local as in you have a Switch, your friend has a Switch, and you all connect through ad hoc and play the game that way. I feel that is the way that I really like experiencing that game myself, personally. But playing in single player still has its fun moments. Like most of the footage that you'll be watching is me playing in single player. So let's talk about the classes themselves, in case you guys are curious. So there's the Empress class, which is kind of like the balanced class. She's the female character with the sword and the dragon arm. She's able to shoot enemies from afar using the dragon arm, and she can also charge that up to deal like a massive AoE blast attack type of situation, and it deals tons of damage. She's supposedly like the most DPS-oriented of classes because she can both attack in close range as well as from long range. She also has reasonable mobility with her whip, and she has medium survivability. I think she's like the second in terms of her HP, but the only class that I've played at great length at the moment is Warrior because, like I said, it is pretty hard to master each of the classes in this game. The Empress ranks 2 in terms of difficulty for solo play, according to what one of the developers actually told me. Then the Shinobi, which is the fastest, safest, and most mobile class. He just runs all over the place. He can glide, can climb up walls, and his special attack, he charges at enemies. And once he charges at enemies, he's then able to just like throw a bunch of kunais at them, as well as shuriken, and everything instantly hones in on the enemy, which makes him one of the safer classes. And he's also able to take aggro from monsters to kind of keep them focused on him, because he's usually safely somewhere in the air throwing kunai, or further away from the enemy throwing shuriken and stuff like that, which makes him a really, really good class to have. I believe he also buffs how fast everybody gets their dragon points, which gives them access to their special abilities. The Witch, the best description that I have for the Witch is she's kind of weird. She's a little bit weird. She plays completely different from all of the other classes, and I find her to probably be the most mechanically challenging class, at least at the start, because she basically has a special that she does where she goes into a casting mode, and then you have to input several button combinations to do different spells. So for instance, you would press the cast button and then you would spam Y, and she would throw out these whirlwinds at monsters. But if instead of that you press the A button and then you press cast and then you press Y 4 times, then she will throw out the whirlwind attacks, and she will keep them stored so she can keep throwing them out until she runs out of dragon points. So she can store magic and then use it repeatedly until she runs out of mana. And it just makes it so weird because you're just like, okay, but those seem like simple combinations. I'm like, okay, so now let's try storing like these whirlwinds for later use and upgrade them with special abilities. So for instance, you can do a combination, which would be A to trigger the storing of it, and then R to trigger casting mode, and then press Y 4 times. And then after that, go into casting mode again, and then press BX, 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 BX. I'm not kidding. And that would level up the whirlwinds to be one level higher, and they would deal more damage. Or instead of that, you could input maybe a more complex combination, which will increase the number of projectiles in the whirlwind attacks, or something else which would make it so they would home in on your target. And I was just like, Jesus Christ, this is insane. The number of things that you can do. And the witch can also heal the entire party if you do the combination BYXAB. So if you do casting BXYAB, and you will heal. Or you can cast a light for dark places, which there are missions where it's so dark that you can't see a damn thing. So the witch can actually cast a lantern. I believe the combination for that was XYA. But I'm not entirely sure. No, XYYA or something like that. So basically, the witch is just really weird. It almost feels like Magicka in a way, like if you guys remember Magicka back in the day. So it's a very interesting class, and supposedly, according to the developer, the hardest class to play solo. The Shinobi is the easiest one, in case you're wondering, and the warrior is number 3. Speaking of the warrior, he is the tankiest class, so naturally, that is the one that I'm playing. He's also the least mobile class and the slowest class. While you are moving, which basically means that you have to spam run all the time in order to get anywhere with the warrior. As a matter of fact, I also think that probably in gameplay terms, the warrior gameplay might be one of the least interesting ones to watch, because you're probably just watching me charge my weapon, run at monsters, unleash the charge attack, and then recharge the weapon, run at monsters again, and unleash the charge attack, because that's pretty much how the warrior plays if you're playing it safe, which is what I end up doing most of the time. Now, the warrior also has, like I mentioned previously, a berserk ability where you can increase the damage that you deal immensely, and you also have access to like this special attack that deals tons of damage. Problem is, when you do that, most monsters in the game will be able to like 2 to 3 shot you, which is insane. But yeah, I still find the warrior a lot of fun to play, so there you go. One of the things to keep in mind with this game, like I said, is that gear is extremely important in single player because of the difficulty levels of playing single player, and multiplayer is a lot easier and more optimal way to play the game. So I know that a lot of people are going to be like, is it worth playing this game in single player? And what I can tell you is that personally I still like it, but I'm not sure that everyone will. But in multiplayer, though, it becomes a very easy recommendation. Like if you have 2 or 3 friends that are interested in getting into this game, I think you will all have a blast playing through it because it's a lot of fun playing it in multiplayer. Now, moving onwards, you guys might wonder, okay, but what does the gameplay actually feel like? Well, you're running through these levels, platforming and engaging in combat. You level up your character in between these different missions that you take. The level up does make quite a bit of difference in terms of the damage that you do, your hit chances on the enemies, and even increasing your dragon powers, which is particularly important depending on the character that you are playing. So yeah, it feels good. The gameplay loop, in my opinion, feels good. Going on the different missions, exploring the different maps, which they reuse some of the same maps, but they give you like different monsters on them and different routes that you will have to take. You will see that a lot of the times as you are going through a map, you'll be like, oh, but there was a route that I missed and I couldn't go there, and that will unlock in future missions from what I can tell at least. So I like the moment-to-moment gameplay of it. I love the art. Overall, I get a very positive vibe from this game. I do have a couple of criticisms that I've already expressed this, even because one of the developers was at my live stream, and I expressed that there are a couple of things that I would like if they could improve on. One of the things is I would like a couple of more options to rebind my controls. And I realize that even though the controls in this game are simple, they require you to be extremely tight in some situations, particularly in specific boss fights. So it's like I really do feel like, oh man, I would like to rebind this thing here and there. Because there's one binding option that is missing, and that is that you cannot map things to the triggers. You can map them to the shoulder buttons, but not the triggers. And I really wanted a couple of more things to be on the triggers. And I wasn't able to do that, and that was one of the things that I had. The other thing is that you have to spam the run button if you want your character to keep running. You can't hold it down in order to maintain like your character in the run state, which felt very weird. The fact that you had to spam it. Like, I understand when you press the button, your character runs for a little bit of time and then stops. So if you wanted to keep it going, you have to go like run, 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 or as most of us end up doing, you just start spamming the button non-stop. And I think that I'm gonna break the freaking button on one of my Joy-Cons if I keep pressing it as violently as I've been pressing it, because like I said, in some of these missions you're gonna be incredibly stressed for time, so you're just running all over the place, and not being able to just keep the button pressed doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. But you know, again, these are not particularly big things. The other thing is refilling your consumables in single player is a bit of a pain, because every time that you finish a mission, you go back to town, and then in town you have to go all the way back to the inn, which is, you know, it's not a big run or anything like that, but in between every mission, if you've used, you know, one or two of your consumables, you have to move away from the inn, which is where you take your quests, back from the bar, the tavern, whatever it is, where you take your quests back all the way back to the inn, so that you can then change your equipment around. And in the change your equipment is where you like go and put your consumables back, and then you go back to the bar to take the next quest. Why do I say single player? Because in multiplayer, there's a screen right there that you can just go to equipment and change your equipment, and you're good to go. So I kind of feel like that screen should just be available for single player as well. In the place where you take your missions, you should just have like an equip screen so that you can refill your consumables. And at the same time, I wish we had item loadouts, because there's like, I don't know if it's 10 slots or however many it is, 10 slots that you can put for consumables in between each mission. And every time that I finish a mission, say for instance, I used, I don't know, 3-4 herbs and some antidotes on a mission, I have to go and manually select, okay, in slot 1, I want this herb. Slot 2, I want that herb. Slot 3, I want this thing. I wish that was a little bit faster so that I could get back in the game faster. And then I'm just wondering about the single player balance, because it just feels like such a different experience between multiplayer and single player, which again is not a bad thing, but it makes me wonder if it could be done better, or I don't know, because I know for a fact that probably a lot of the outlets that cover this are going to say this game's too hard or something along those lines, but I'm not sure if I would want it any other way when I'm playing by myself. It's kind of weird, potentially even conflicting. But either way, that's how I feel about Dragon Marked for Death. At the end of the day, like I said, I would still recommend it if you enjoy hard games, or if you have a couple of friends that want to play it and you enjoy multiplayer games of this kind with your friends. I would definitely recommend it. I think it's a lot of fun. But ultimately, if this is not your jam, or if you get frustrated easily, maybe steer clear of it, because this is pretty challenging. Anyway, thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, hit it up with a like. If you did not enjoy this video, hit it up with a dislike. If you usually enjoy my videos, do remember, subscribe, hit the bell notification icon so that you're actually notified, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
You